AITA for refusing to let my sister's kids stay at my house after she moved in next door. So this is going to be long, but I want to give all the details because it's been a huge source of stress for me. And honestly, I'm still questioning whether I'm the asshole here. I, 32M, live in a quiet neighborhood in a 3-bedroom house that I've owned for about 5 years. I love the place. It's peaceful. My garden is my sanctuary, and I've put a lot of work into making it feel like my own little haven. I live alone, and I'm pretty introverted, so my home is really my comfort zone. About a year ago, my younger sister, Emily, 28F, bought the house next door. She has 3 kids, ages 5, 8, and 10, and has been a single mom since she split from her ex-husband, who lives in another state. Emily is generally a nice person, but she's a bit reckless and doesn't really have a strong sense of boundaries. I knew living near her would be different from living alone, but I try to stay optimistic. I like my niece and nephews, and I want them to have family around. The issue is, from the moment she moved in, it's been nonstop chaos. The first problem started a few months after she moved in. She asked if her kids could come over whenever because she needed time to run errands or manage things around her house. I said okay for short visits, like an hour or 2 during the day, but I also told her I wasn't comfortable with her kids staying overnight. She seemed fine with that, and things were manageable at first. Then, one weekend, she dropped off all 3 kids at my house at 7 a.m., saying she had to go to work early and would pick them up later. I didn't even have a chance to say no, because she just assumed I would watch them. I ended up spending the whole day running them around to the park, making snacks, dealing with fights, and cleaning up messes they left everywhere. When she came back, she acted like nothing happened, and I tried to subtly hint that this wasn't okay. She said, "You love the kids, it's fine. You'll get used to it." That was the start of it becoming a regular thing. It got worse when her ex-husband's new girlfriend started visiting. Emily would leave the kids with me for hours at a time to go discuss co-parenting issues, even though I wasn't involved in any of that. She also started letting them just come over after school on weekdays, sometimes without telling me in advance. I had to rearrange my schedule constantly, and my house never felt like my own. I tried talking to her several times. I said I was happy to babysit occasionally, but I couldn't do it regularly because I work from home and need quiet time. I suggested she hire a babysitter or look into after-school programs. Each time, she brushed me off and said, "Come on, it's family. You don't have to be so uptight." She has literally said this multiple times, and honestly, it started to feel like she sees my house as a free daycare. The breaking point came a few weeks ago. I had planned a weekend alone to decompress because work had been stressful. On Friday evening, I went to bed early, and at 6 a.m., the doorbell rang. It was Emily asking me to watch the kids for the entire weekend because she had a work trip and her friend couldn't make it. I told her firmly that I was not available, that I had personal plans, and that my house was my private space. She got angry and accused me of being selfish and uncaring toward my own family. She said, "They're your niece and nephews. How can you say no to them?" I explained that I love them, but loving them didn't mean I had to host them for days against my will. Emily then tried a different tactic. She asked if at least one of the kids could stay overnight. I said no. She said too. I said no again. Then she said she would just leave them outside until I opened the door. At that point, I was furious. I told her that if she left them here uninvited, I would call the authorities because that would be considered abandonment. She finally left, but she sent me multiple angry texts calling me cruel and selfish. Since then, our relationship has been strained. She's been passive-aggressive, leaving notes like, "Hope you enjoy your quiet weekend alone," or "Thanks for nothing, uncle." Meanwhile, some of my neighbors have noticed that she leaves her kids unattended sometimes, and a few have asked me if I'm watching them because I live next door. I've made it clear that I will only watch them if it's prearranged and for a short period, but she continues to push boundaries. I feel like I'm trapped between wanting to be a good uncle and also needing my own space. I have no desire to harm her or take the kids away, but I also can't handle my house being turned into an unofficial daycare. I've even considered putting up a sign asking her not to bring the kids over uninvited, but that feels harsh. My friends and coworkers are divided. Some say I'm perfectly within my rights to protect my home, while others say I should bend a little because it's family. I want to help her when I can, but it has to be on my terms, not hers. I'm tired of feeling guilty for wanting to protect my home and my mental health. I can't keep saying yes just to avoid conflict, and I can't force her to respect my boundaries. At this point, I feel like maybe I'm being unreasonable, but I also feel like she's overstepping massively. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister's kids stay at my house, especially overnight, and insisting that I need boundaries even though they are my nieces and nephews. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for ruining my family's vacation because I refused to follow a bizarre tradition. So, this past Christmas, my extended family decided to rent a cabin in the mountains for a week-long holiday getaway. My family isn't small. We're talking my parents, my 2 siblings, my partner Alex, and then my aunt, uncle, and their 3 kids, plus a few cousins. Normally, I'm someone who loves holidays and family traditions, but this time, I found myself in a position I wasn't sure how to handle. Here's the background. My family has this tradition that has existed for as long as I can remember. Every Christmas Eve, after dinner, everyone goes into the living room for what they call the gift circle. Basically, each person, starting with the oldest, has to give a gift to someone else in the circle, but there's a twist. The gift can't be wrapped and has to be something from around the house. So, technically, it's not really a present in the traditional sense. It could be a coffee mug, a candle, a book, or even a pair of socks. The point, supposedly, is to be creative and thoughtful in a way that's meaningful but also kind of funny. The problem is it always turns into chaos. People get really competitive about how clever or funny their gifts are, and arguments happen over whether something is too cheap or not funny enough. Last year, my cousin Mark threw a tantrum because someone gave him a jar of pickles, claiming it was mocking him, which escalated into him storming out of the dinner table. I've always hated this tradition. I've tried participating in the past, but every time it ends with someone being upset or passive-aggressively complaining about their gift. I've tried suggesting alternatives, like a Secret Santa where we all bring real gifts, but my parents insist that this tradition is what makes Christmas special for the family. So this year, I decided I wasn't going to participate. Before the trip, I told my parents and Alex that I would sit out the gift circle and just watch. My reasoning was simple. I enjoy spending time with the family, but I don't want to be part of a ritual that feels stressful and childish to me. My parents seemed a little annoyed, but didn't push back. I thought that was the end of it. The trip started out fine. The cabin was beautiful, snow everywhere, fireplaces working, hot cocoa flowing. Everyone seemed in good spirits. But as Christmas Eve approached, the tension started to build. My aunt and uncle, who are very traditional, kept reminding me that I had to join in. I repeated that I didn't want to, but they kept saying things like, "It's not the same without you," or "You're breaking the family tradition." On Christmas Eve, after a huge dinner that my mom had prepared for days, we all gathered in the living room. As usual, everyone was holding a random item they had scavenged from their rooms or the cabin. The gifts ranged from a single slipper to a half-empty bottle of sunscreen. When it got to me, I simply said, "I'm not doing this year. I'm just going to sit and watch." That's when the real drama started. My aunt gasped loudly, and my uncle gave me the most disappointed look I've ever seen. "You can't just sit out. This is about family, about tradition," my aunt said. My cousin, who's 12, looked confused and whispered, "But I thought it was supposed to be fun." My parents exchanged a glance, clearly uncomfortable. I explained that I wasn't trying to ruin the fun or disrespect anyone, but that I genuinely didn't enjoy it. I suggested that maybe the rest of the family could go on without me. My mom looked like she was about to cry, and my dad finally said, "You're making it awkward for everyone. You don't get to opt out of family traditions just because it's inconvenient for you." By this point, the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. I stayed seated, refusing to pick up anything, and After a few more rounds of passive-aggressive comments from my aunt about spoiling the holiday spirit, I quietly excused myself and went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. When I came back, the gift circle had finished, and my parents were not speaking to me. The rest of the family seemed divided. Some were sympathetic, some were clearly annoyed. My uncle cornered me later and said, "You owe the family an apology. You embarrassed us in front of the kids." I argued that I hadn't embarrassed anyone. I had simply chosen not to participate. The night ended with a very cold dinner, almost everyone avoiding eye contact with me. The next morning, my dad texted me, saying that I need to understand the importance of family unity and that I shouldn't let my stubbornness ruin holidays for everyone else. Alex, who had been quietly supporting me, said he understood why I didn't want to participate, but admitted that the situation made him uncomfortable because he had never seen this side of my family before. I feel awful because the trip, which was supposed to be a joyful time, ended up being tense and awkward. But at the same time, I don't think it's unreasonable to refuse to take part in a tradition that I genuinely find stressful and childish. I kept my behavior respectful. I didn't insult anyone. I didn't storm off in anger. I just refused to participate. Since we got back home, my parents have been cold toward me, and my aunt has sent multiple passive-aggressive texts saying things like, "Maybe next year you'll be ready to join the family again." My cousins keep asking me why I ruined Christmas, which I find absurd. So, AITA here, I didn't actively do anything to hurt anyone. I just opted out of a tradition I don't enjoy. But now I'm being treated like the villain for setting a personal boundary. Has anyone been in a similar situation where family expectations clash with personal comfort? How do you navigate traditions that feel toxic or stressful without being labeled the bad guy? AITA for standing up to my sister over her constant interference in my family's life, even though it caused a huge rift. I, 34M, have always been very close to my younger sister, Emily, 31F. We grew up in a household where our parents were extremely hands-on and controlling. So naturally, we promised each other that when we became adults, we'd respect each other's boundaries and let each other make our own choices. I moved out of the family home at 22, and Emily followed a few years later. For a long time, things were great. We would talk regularly, share news about work, relationships, and generally support each other. The issue started when I got married to my wife, Sarah, about 5 years ago. Emily has always been opinionated, but after my marriage, she became a lot more intrusive. She started questioning everything about our decisions, from the house we bought to the way we planned our holidays. At first, Sarah and I brushed it off as normal sisterly curiosity, but over time it became obvious that Emily wasn't just interested. She wanted to control and correct our lives according to her vision. One of the earliest incidents was about our first child. Emily started giving unsolicited advice from the moment she knew I was going to be a father. She criticized our choice of pediatrician, questioned our parenting style, and even sent multiple articles about why certain baby products were unsafe or bad choices. Sarah, who is incredibly patient and laid back, tried to ignore it, but I could see the stress it was causing her. It got worse when my parents started siding with Emily. They would casually echo her opinions whenever we visited, making us feel like we were constantly being judged. I tried to handle it diplomatically for a long time, smiling, nodding, and politely explaining our choices, but Emily escalated. She started showing up unannounced at our home, offering help that was really just criticism disguised as assistance. She would rearrange things in our house, comment on our furniture, and lecture Sarah about cooking, cleaning, and child-rearing. The breaking point came last year. We had planned a small family vacation for Sarah, our kids, and me. Emily found out about it and insisted that she and her family be included. I explained that we wanted this vacation to be just our immediate family, and she became extremely passive-aggressive. She sent long texts about how we were excluding family and how our children needed to bond with their aunt and cousins. I didn't respond because I knew it would turn into a long argument, but when she didn't get a response, she called multiple times a day and started messaging my parents to guilt-trip them into intervening. On the day we left for the vacation, Emily showed up at our house, uninvited, with her kids and her husband. I was furious but tried to stay calm. I told her firmly that we had planned this trip as a private family holiday and that she needed to leave. She refused to leave and started crying, claiming that I was being unreasonable and selfish. My parents arrived shortly after, visibly upset that I had asked Emily to leave, and they started lecturing me about family unity. Sarah was close to tears, and I felt cornered, but I finally had to make a hard choice. I called Emily and her husband a cab and paid for them to leave. I also made it clear that while I loved Emily, the constant interference had to stop, and that if she couldn't respect our boundaries, we couldn't continue like this. Since then, the relationship with Emily and my parents has been strained. Emily has not spoken to me directly, only through social media posts that are clearly aimed at making me feel guilty. My parents visit less often and make subtle comments about how families should support each other. Some of my friends and extended family think I overreacted, saying I could have handled it more gently or included her somehow. On the other hand, Sarah and our children are much happier now, and I finally feel like I can make decisions for my family without constant judgment. I've reflected a lot on this situation, and I feel like I did the right thing in standing up to Emily. But I also feel guilty because the rift it caused is significant, and I hate seeing my parents upset. I'm conflicted because I know that continuing to tolerate Emily's interference would have been damaging in the long run, but I also can't help feeling like I might have been too harsh in the moment, especially with the cab incident. So, AITA for standing up to my sister over her constant interference, even though it caused a major family rift. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after what happened last year. This has been eating at me, and I need an outside perspective because my family is divided, and I feel like I'm being painted as the villain. So a little backstory. My sister, Jenna, and I have always had a complicated relationship. We were close as kids, but as we got older, our personalities clashed. She's very controlling and likes things her way, while I tend to be more laid back and value my independence. Our parents have always tried to mediate, but honestly, it's always felt like she gets away with more because she's more dramatic and I'm reasonable. Last year, she got engaged to her now husband, Mark, and she immediately started planning a massive wedding. I tried to be supportive, but she was very particular about who she wanted to invite and how things should be done. I didn't think it was a big deal at first, just normal bride stuff, but then the tension started. The first big issue came when she asked me to be a bridesmaid. I said yes, thinking it would be fun and that it would make her happy. The problem is, she didn't just want me to be a bridesmaid. She wanted me to be her right-hand person for everything. She drafted a detailed schedule of tasks I needed to complete each week, from researching catering options to designing decorations to organizing bridal showers, all on top of my full-time job. I tried to explain that I couldn't commit to that level of responsibility, but she insisted, saying it was family duty and that I was being selfish. Things escalated when she made demands about my appearance. She picked out the exact dress I had to wear, down to the color, style, and accessories. When I suggested a different shoe that was more comfortable, she completely lost it, saying it would ruin her aesthetic. I ended up buying the dress and shoes she wanted, which were extremely expensive and uncomfortable, and wore them to appease her. The breaking point, however, came about 3 months before the wedding. I had a really stressful week at work, and I asked if we could postpone a planning session by a day. She started screaming at me over the phone, accusing me of not caring about her happiness and threatening that if I didn't show up on time, I shouldn't bother coming to the wedding at all. I tried to explain that I was just asking for a one-day delay, but she refused to listen. Around that time, Mark, her fiancé, started confiding in me. He said he felt guilty about how Jenna was treating me and that he didn't want me to feel trapped. He even told me he wished I could set boundaries because he knew how controlling she could be. I appreciated his honesty, but it made me more anxious about the whole situation. Despite all this, I attended the wedding, hoping it would go smoothly. But on the day, she had another meltdown. She criticized everything I did, from how I styled my hair to how I interacted with guests. At one point, she even shouted at me in front of half the wedding party because I took a photo with a cousin she didn't like. I felt humiliated and exhausted by the end of the night. After the wedding, I took some time to distance myself. I tried to talk to her about how hurtful her behavior was, but she gaslit me, saying I was overreacting and never happy for anyone. Our parents tried to mediate again, but honestly, I couldn't face her without feeling angry and resentful. Fast forward to now, Jenna is planning a vow renewal ceremony. She's made it clear that she wants all of us there and has started sending out invitations. When I told her I couldn't attend, she exploded. She accused me of holding grudges, being unsupportive, and trying to steal the spotlight from her new marriage. She's also been telling other family members that I'm being dramatic and selfish for refusing to come. I feel guilty because I know it will hurt her, but I also feel like I have the right to protect my mental health. I've tried to set boundaries before, and it never worked. I also feel like attending this vow renewal would force me into the same situation I experienced last year, being micromanaged, criticized, and stressed out. I don't think it's unreasonable to want to avoid that, but now my family is split. Some say I should put my feelings aside for the sake of family harmony, while others think I'm justified in protecting myself. I am honestly torn. Part of me wants to attend just to keep the peace, but I also know that doing so might reopen old wounds and create more resentment. I've considered sending a gift or a heartfelt message instead, but she insists that my physical presence is mandatory for this celebration of love. So, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's vow renewal ceremony after everything that happened last year. I feel like I'm finally standing up for myself, but I'm also worried that I'm being unfair or cruel. I just don't know what the right balance is between family loyalty and self-respect. I would really appreciate honest opinions here because my emotions are all over the place, and I feel like I'm being painted as the villain in a story I didn't even ask to be part of. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé's behavior. I, 28F, come from a fairly close-knit family. I have one younger sister, Emma, 25F, and our parents have always been very involved in our lives. Growing up, Emma and I were incredibly close. We shared clothes, secrets, and even a room for a while. Over the last few years, though, our relationship has changed. Not drastically, but enough that I've started to notice patterns that bother me. Emma started dating her now fiancé, Jake, 27M, about 2 years ago. At first, I liked him. He was funny, charming, and he seemed genuinely interested in my sister's life and well-being. I made an effort to get to know him because I wanted to support Emma, and I think she appreciated that. Over time, however, things began to shift. Jake started displaying some behaviors that made me uncomfortable, though Emma either didn't notice or brushed them off. For example, Jake has a habit of being condescending in subtle ways. He'll make jokes that belittle people, often in a way that seems harmless to others, but it comes across as aggressive and manipulative. He also has a tendency to correct Emma in public, as if she can't make her own decisions. One time, we were at a family dinner, and Emma ordered salad. Jake immediately started criticizing her choice, saying it wasn't enough food for someone her size, and that she needed to eat more protein. I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe it was a one-off, but then it happened again the next month and the month after that. What really solidified my concerns was an incident last Thanksgiving. My parents invited Emma and Jake to our house for dinner. I noticed Jake being incredibly dismissive toward my mother's cooking. He made several comments about how overly complicated the dishes were and why anyone would eat this stuff before anyone else even had a chance to try it. My mom looked hurt, and Emma didn't say anything. Afterward, Emma told me Jake was just being honest and that I shouldn't take it personally, but left a bad taste in my mouth. Another issue is that Jake often tries to isolate Emma from the rest of the family. He insists on doing things just the two of us, and seems irritated if Emma wants to spend time with anyone else. I don't know if he realizes it, but he's made Emma cancel plans with friends and family several times. When I confronted Emma about this, she said she didn't feel like it was controlling, but that she understood my concern. Now, to the current situation. Emma got engaged about 6 months ago, and the wedding planning has been stressful but fairly standard. Invitations were sent out a month ago, and I was included. I've always been someone who supports my sister, even when I disagree with her choices. But as the wedding got closer, I noticed some red flags about Jake that I couldn't ignore. He made several comments about wanting perfect photos, criticizing family members' appearances, and even suggesting that certain relatives shouldn't be invited because they would ruin the aesthetic. I found this controlling and toxic, especially since it targeted people I love. A week ago, I had a long conversation with Emma. I explained that I felt uncomfortable attending the wedding because of Jake's behavior and the way he treats her. I told her that I was worried about what his attitude would do to the family dynamic and that I didn't want to be in a situation where I felt I had to pick sides or pretend everything was fine. Emma was visibly upset. She accused me of being judgmental and said I was overreacting. She reminded me that this is her wedding and that I should support her no matter what. I tried to explain that supporting her doesn't mean supporting behavior that I see as harmful or abusive, but she was firm in her stance. Since that conversation, tensions have risen. My parents are upset with me because they think I'm making the wedding about me. They say that family disagreements are normal and that I should just grin and bear it. My friends are divided. Some think I'm justified in refusing to attend because I don't want to legitimize Jake's behavior, while others think I'm being dramatic and should just go for the sake of family peace. I've thought a lot about whether I'm overreacting. I understand that weddings are meant to be joyous occasions, and I really do want Emma to have a happy day. But I also feel that attending would be complicit in endorsing behavior I find disrespectful and controlling. I worry that if I go, I'll end up in arguments with Jake or feeling resentment toward him and Emma, which isn't fair to anyone. I'm torn because part of me feels guilty for potentially upsetting my sister on one of the most important days of her life. But another part of me feels that my boundaries and mental health are equally important. I've tried to be supportive in other ways, offering to help with planning, giving advice, and spending quality time with Emma. But when it comes to physically being at the wedding, I just can't reconcile my feelings with the situation. So, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because I'm concerned about her fiancé's behavior and how it will impact her and the rest of the family. I don't want to create a rift, but I also feel like I can't compromise on my principles. I've considered going, but staying mostly out of the way, but I'm afraid that even minimal attendance would feel like tacit approval. I know it's a messy situation, and I've tried to explain my reasoning calmly and respectfully, but the response I've gotten has been mixed at best. I'm hoping to gain perspective on whether my concerns are valid and whether my refusal to attend makes me an asshole or just someone trying to protect myself and my family from toxicity. If anyone has been in a similar situation, I'd love to hear how you navigated it without completely alienating your family. But I also want honest opinions about whether I'm justified or overreacting. I've spent hours weighing the pros and cons, and honestly, I feel emotionally exhausted. I want to do the right thing by my sister, but I also want to maintain my own boundaries and avoid a situation where I might feel forced to endure behavior I find unacceptable. So, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé? I, 32F, have always been close to my younger sister, Emily, 28F. We grew up very connected, sharing everything from clothes to secrets. Over the past few years, our lives naturally diverged. Emily moved across the country for work, and I stayed in our hometown, focusing on my career and my relationship with my partner, Mark, 34M. Despite the distance, we've stayed in touch, mostly through calls and texts, and I've visited her a few times a year. About a year ago, Emily started dating someone named Ryan, 30M. At first, I didn't have much interaction with him. She would tell me over the phone that he was great and funny, but there was something that immediately made me uncomfortable whenever I met him in person. I tried to brush it off, thinking it was just first impressions. However, over time, those feelings only grew stronger. Ryan is charming in social situations, but I noticed that he often belittled Emily subtly, and sometimes even directly. He'd make these backhanded compliments or tease her in ways that seemed funny on the surface, but were actually mean-spirited. For instance, when Emily mentioned she was excited about a promotion at work, Ryan said something like, "Well, you're finally catching up to me," in a tone that felt condescending. At first, Emily laughed it off, but I could see it hurt her. Things escalated over the months. Ryan would often make critical comments about my lifestyle choices and marking me. He once told me I was too sensitive when I expressed concern over an incident at a family gathering where he mocked another cousin for their weight. I also noticed him trying to isolate Emily from her friends and family subtly, insisting that she spend more weekends with him or discouraging her from traveling to visit us. I tried bringing my concerns to Emily gently, but she would always defend him, saying I was misreading things or that he just had a dry sense of humor. Last month, Emily got engaged. I felt a mixture of happiness for her and dread about Ryan. She asked me to be her maid of honor. I was torn. On one hand, I love my sister and want to support her. On the other hand, I couldn't shake the discomfort I felt around Ryan, and I didn't want to pretend everything was fine. A few weeks ago, she asked me to help plan the wedding. She was excited about my input and seemed to value my opinion, but I found it difficult to contribute when I felt so uneasy about Ryan. I tried to offer ideas for decorations and invitations, but every suggestion I made, Ryan would either dismiss or subtly mock. Emily brushed it off, saying he was just joking. The breaking point came during a visit to their apartment. I had offered to help with some wedding preparations. Ryan was unusually tense and critical that day. He criticized the way I handled some of the decorations I was arranging, saying, "Are you sure you know what you're doing? I've seen people like you mess this up before." I froze, unsure how to respond. Emily didn't say anything, just gave me a tight-lipped smile. Later that night, she said Ryan was stressed because of work and I should be patient. After that visit, I spent several days reflecting. I realized that my unease wasn't just a fleeting feeling. It was a pattern of behavior from Ryan that I found toxic and disrespectful. I also realized that if I were to participate fully in the wedding, I would have to pretend to be okay with his treatment of Emily, which I couldn't do in good conscience. I called Emily and told her the truth. I explained that I loved her and wanted to be there for her, but I could not be part of the wedding because I did not feel comfortable around Ryan and could not ignore his behavior toward her and others. Emily was shocked. She started crying and said I was overreacting and not giving Ryan a chance. She insisted that everyone in her family and friend circle liked him and that my opinion didn't matter. I tried to stay calm and said that my concern wasn't about being liked, but about what I perceived as harmful behavior. The conversation ended with Emily saying she would respect my decision, but that she felt hurt and disappointed. She also told me that I was being selfish and that my refusal to attend could potentially damage our relationship permanently. Since then, other family members have weighed in. My parents have expressed that they understand my concerns, but think I should go to the wedding for Emily's sake. Some cousins have told me they don't think Ryan is as bad as I say, and that I might be misinterpreting his behavior. Mark supports me and agrees that I should not feel obligated to put myself in a toxic situation. I'm now in a dilemma. On one hand, I want to support my sister and be part of an important milestone in her life. On the other hand, I feel strongly that attending the wedding would mean condoning Ryan's behavior, which I am unwilling to do. I've offered to celebrate with Emily in other ways, such as having a private dinner or visiting after the honeymoon, but she seems to think that's insufficient. I know this is likely to cause tension and maybe even long-term rifts in our family, but I feel that compromising my boundaries in this situation would be worse. I also feel guilty for potentially hurting Emily, who has always been close to me. So, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé? AITA for refusing to babysit my sister's kids after she insulted my career? I, 32F, have always had a pretty structured life. I work as a software engineer, and over the past few years I've been fortunate to climb the ladder to a position I enjoy and that pays well. I'm not married, and I don't have kids, which has always been a conscious choice. My younger sister, Hannah, 28F, is married with 2 kids, ages 4 and 6. She's always been more spontaneous than me, and she's the type who makes decisions based on emotion rather than logic. A few months ago, Hannah called me out of the blue, sounding frustrated and stressed. She explained that her husband had to travel for work, and she had an important presentation at her job. She asked if I could watch her kids for a week. Normally, I wouldn't mind helping for a day or two, but a full week was a big ask. I gently declined, explaining that my job has tight deadlines, and taking a full week off wasn't feasible. I suggested perhaps a day here or there, or maybe a trusted babysitter, but she seemed disappointed. After that, things became tense between us. Hannah made a few passive-aggressive remarks about me choosing my career over family. One evening, she texted, "I guess some of us actually care about family. Must be nice to have a job that matters more than your own sister's kids." I felt hurt because my career is important to me, but I also contribute in other ways. I help financially when she's in a pinch. I send gifts to the kids. I call to check in, and I try to be emotionally supportive. Fast forward to last weekend. Hannah called again, saying her husband had to leave town last minute, and she was overwhelmed with the kids and some work obligations. She asked if I could take them for just a couple of days. I told her that I was booked solid with a major project at work that I couldn't defer. I offered to send over a small care package for the kids instead. She got defensive, saying I was always working and never there when it counts. Then things escalated. She accused me of being selfish and implied that because I'm childless and career-focused, I have no idea what it's like to be responsible for children. I responded by pointing out that I do know it's challenging, but that doesn't mean I can drop all my responsibilities at the drop of a hat. She said I was choosing to be a robot over being a human, and I told her that insulting my career choices was crossing a line. Our conversation ended abruptly, and she hasn't spoken to me since. Here's the part where my family comes in. Our parents got involved after hearing about the argument. They sided mostly with Hannah, saying that as family, I should be more accommodating. My parents have always been a bit traditional, so to them, childcare is a natural responsibility for someone without kids, especially a sibling. I explained my perspective that while I love her and the kids, I also have commitments that can't be shuffled around on short notice, but they don't seem to understand. I've had friends weigh in, too. Some think I should have helped even though it was inconvenient, but others say I'm justified in setting boundaries. I've tried reaching out to Hannah calmly, explaining that I want to be supportive in ways that are actually feasible for me, helping with small errands, planning weekend visits with the kids when I'm free, or sending gifts, but she hasn't responded. I also made it clear that I'm willing to help with childcare if it's planned weeks in advance, not something sprung on me last minute, but I feel like that's an unreasonable stance to her. I should also mention that Hannah is a little controlling and has a habit of making demands rather than asking. She often assumes I have nothing better to do, which isn't the case. Even when I volunteered to help in the past, she sometimes uses it as leverage to guilt me into more. My concern is that if I give in now, it sets a precedent where she assumes I'm always available, which would be stressful and unsustainable. The tension has been affecting my relationship with other family members. At family dinners, the atmosphere is awkward. My parents hint that I should step up for Hannah and the kids, and my sister hasn't spoken to me since the last confrontation. I feel torn because I love my sister and her kids, but I also feel my boundaries are being ignored. I worry that accommodating her every request would come at the cost of my career and mental health. I'm not against family support. I have helped in ways that suit my schedule, like arranging tutors, sending birthday gifts, or helping financially, but I don't want to be treated as if my career and personal boundaries are irrelevant. I've tried explaining this calmly, but it seems to make her more resentful. I'm now considering limiting contact until the situation cools down, because every interaction lately seems to lead to an argument. So, AITA for refusing to babysit my sister's kids, especially after she insulted my career choices. I feel like I'm being reasonable, setting healthy boundaries, and trying to offer support in other ways, but my family seems to think I'm the bad guy here. I want to maintain a relationship with Hannah, but I also don't want to compromise my job or be treated disrespectfully. I'm curious if there's a perspective I'm missing here. I've reflected on my actions and words multiple times, but I still feel like I'm in the right, or at least justified in saying no. Has anyone experienced this kind of family pressure where saying no leads to conflict? How do you balance personal responsibilities with family expectations without being labeled selfish? AITA? AITA for refusing to let my younger sister's fiancé move in with me before they are married? I, 32F, live in a fairly spacious two-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city. I've lived here for about 6 years, and I really love my space. It's my sanctuary, and after years of shared apartments and roommates in college, I've grown to appreciate having a place where I can set the rules and maintain a certain level of privacy. I work from home, So the quiet is important, and I also host a lot of small get-togethers with friends, which I enjoy doing without worrying about disturbing anyone else. My younger sister, Emily, 28F, recently got engaged to her boyfriend of 3 years, Jason, 30M. When they got engaged, they started casually talking about moving in together while they planned their wedding. I'm very close to Emily and have always been supportive of her relationships, but I have a different view on living arrangements before marriage. I've never lived with a partner before marriage myself, and I personally think it changes the dynamic in ways that aren't always beneficial unless the couple is already married or in a very long-term, serious cohabitation situation. I realize that the personal opinion and not necessarily universal. A few weeks ago, Emily came over and asked if Jason could move in with me temporarily. Their apartment lease ended in a couple of months, and apparently, Jason's current living situation fell through unexpectedly, so they didn't have anywhere to stay. She assured me it would only be for a month or two while they figure things out, and she emphasized that it would be a temporary arrangement. I told her no. I explained that my apartment isn't suitable for an extra person moving in on such short notice, especially someone I don't have a close personal relationship with. I also said that I'm not comfortable having someone live with me before Emily and Jason are married, mainly because of my own boundaries and how I manage my space. I offered to help them find a short-term rental or a friend's couch to crash on, but I made it clear that my apartment wasn't an option. Emily got upset. She said I was being cold and unsupportive because Jason had nowhere to go, and she thought I would understand since I've been there for her during past emergencies. She also reminded me that it would only be temporary, and she argued that we could make it work if I rearranged the living room and stayed in my bedroom. She made it sound like a small inconvenience for me and a huge relief for them. I tried to reason with her again, but she became more frustrated, saying that I was prioritizing my comfort over helping family. She even implied that I was judging their relationship, which wasn't my intention. I reiterated that my decision wasn't about judging Jason or their relationship, but about respecting my own boundaries and comfort. I also pointed out that letting someone move in temporarily in this kind of situation could set a precedent that would be hard to undo if they ended up staying longer than planned. Things escalated when she started asking our parents to intervene. I spoke to them and explained my position calmly. They mostly sided with me, but suggested that maybe I could compromise by letting Jason stay for just a few nights. I politely declined because I felt any compromise of that sort would undermine my boundaries and make the situation more uncomfortable in the long term. Emily stopped speaking to me for a week. When she finally reached out, she said she felt hurt and abandoned, and she accused me of being selfish. I understand that she's frustrated, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm being unfairly criticized for maintaining personal boundaries. I offered to help them find an Airbnb or a short-term lease, but she didn't want to hear it, insisting that I could figure something out. The situation has now created tension in the family. Our parents are trying to stay neutral, but it's obvious that Emily feels betrayed. Jason has not directly contacted me, which I think is for the best. I've been sticking to my decision and trying to remain polite and supportive in other ways, like helping them research temporary housing, but I feel guilty because my sister is genuinely stressed and doesn't have another immediate solution. I keep thinking about whether I should have just let him stay for a few nights, even if it's inconvenient, just to help her out. On the other hand, I also feel that giving in would make me resentful and compromise the principles I've set for my home and personal space. I know this isn't a life or death situation, but I also feel that my boundaries are valid and that I have the right to say no when it comes to living arrangements in my own home. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé move in with me before they are married, even temporarily, despite her being stressed and having no other immediate place to stay. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to let my sister's children stay with me during my wedding weekend. I, 29F, am getting married in a little over 2 months, and I've been trying to plan the wedding of my dreams. My fiancé, Alex, 31M, and I have been together for 5 years, and we finally decided to go with a small, intimate ceremony with only close family and a few friends. We wanted it to feel relaxed, not chaotic, which is why we specifically chose a venue that allows for both indoor and outdoor space, but also limits the number of guests. Here's where the problem started. My sister, Jenna, 27F, has 3 children, ages 5, 8, and 11. Jenna is a single mom and works a lot, which I completely understand. She asked me a few months ago if her kids could stay at my house for the weekend of the wedding. She claimed she couldn't find a babysitter and that the wedding weekend would be chaotic for the kids, so she thought it would be better for them to stay with me, so she could enjoy the wedding stress-free. At first, I tried to be accommodating. I love my nieces and nephew, but I live in a small 2-bedroom apartment with Alex, and there isn't really space for 3 extra kids, especially for multiple nights. I explained this to her and suggested that maybe she could have them stay with a friend or a relative nearby. She got upset and said she had asked everyone else and no one could take them. I then tried to compromise by saying they could come for the ceremony and maybe a few hours for the reception, but that overnight was not possible. Jenna's response was that it was unfair to the kids and that I was being selfish. She even brought up that I had hosted other family events in the past and that I never had a problem accommodating her kids before. I pointed out that those were small gatherings and not an entire wedding weekend, but she didn't want to hear it. The tension escalated when she started texting me multiple times a day about it. She sent messages like, "Are you sure you can't make an exception? And the kids will be bored. You know they'll need supervision." I tried to respond calmly, explaining again that I just don't have the space and that I've been very upfront about what I can and cannot accommodate, but she kept pushing. A few weeks later, she sent me a group text to our extended family saying, "Just a heads up, I might not be able to attend the wedding unless someone takes care of my kids. Hopefully, my sister will step up like she always does." I was blindsided. Not only was she publicly shaming me, but she was also framing me as the villain to the rest of the family. At that point, I had to set some firm boundaries. I replied to her directly, saying that I loved her and her kids, but that my home is not equipped for an extended stay, especially with 3 energetic children during a weekend that I've been planning for months. I offered to help her find a local babysitter or even a nearby hotel for the kids, but I could not have them stay at my place. I made it clear that this was final. Jenna didn't take it well. She said I was being selfish and that I didn't care about family. She accused me of trying to have a perfect Instagram wedding without considering the children. She then went on a long Facebook post about how she wouldn't force her kids on anyone, but how it's sad that family can't support each other during special moments. I didn't respond publicly because I didn't want to escalate things further, but it hurt seeing her portray me like that. Now, some of our extended family members have started messaging me privately. Some are saying I should compromise and let the kids stay, while others are supportive and understand my position. Alex is fully behind me, saying that I've been more than reasonable and that my sister is overstepping. The wedding is approaching, and I'm honestly stressed. I want to enjoy my wedding without worrying about logistics that are beyond my capacity. I also don't want to damage my relationship with my sister, but I feel like I've already tried to compromise multiple times. My parents are caught in the middle and are frustrated with both of us, which makes it even harder. I know family is important, and I don't want to come off as heartless, but this situation has really pushed me to my limits. I've even considered offering to host a small kids' party at a local park during the wedding so that they're entertained without being at my apartment. But Jenna says it's not the same as having them overnight. So, Reddit AITA for refusing to let my sister's kids stay at my place during my wedding weekend. I feel like I've been as accommodating as possible without completely disrupting my own life and the plans Alex and I have made. But my sister insists I'm being selfish, and some family members seem to think I should just make it work for the kids. I'm genuinely torn because I love my nieces and nephew and want them to be part of my wedding in some way, but I also need to protect my boundaries and sanity. Has anyone dealt with a similar situation? How do you navigate family expectations when they conflict with major life events? I really want to handle this in a way that doesn't destroy our relationship permanently, but I also don't want to compromise my wedding plans or my mental health. AITA for refusing to let my brother's kids live with me, even though they're family in need. I, 32M, have always been close to my family, especially my younger brother, Matt, 28M. We grew up in a small town, and our parents were always really hands-on, sometimes overly so, but in a loving way. Matt and I used to be inseparable, but things have changed over the last few years, mostly because of how he's been handling his life. I live in a mid-sized city about 4 hours away from our hometown. I moved here for work and ended up renting a modest 2-bedroom apartment. It's just me, and I love the independence, even if it's a little cramped for entertaining or hosting guests. Matt has always had a tendency to make impulsive decisions. He's intelligent, but he's not great at thinking long-term. A few years ago, he got married to someone I barely knew, and their relationship was shaky almost from the start. They have 2 kids, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. About a year ago, his wife left him. From what I understand, there were a lot of unresolved issues, and the marriage was toxic. The kids live with him full-time now, and he has a job that requires him to work long hours in retail. He's been struggling to keep up with rent, bills, and childcare, and it's been rough for him. A couple of months ago, Matt called me out of the blue. He sounded desperate and stressed. He said he was thinking of moving the kids in with me for a while because he couldn't handle everything on his own and needed my help. I asked him how long he thought this would last, and he said, just until I get back on my feet. A few months, maybe. I hesitated, but didn't say no immediately. I wanted to hear him out. When I asked what he expected in terms of space, he admitted he didn't think the kids would have their own room, which is fine for a short visit, but he hinted he wanted them to stay indefinitely if possible. That's when my hesitation turned into concern. My apartment is 2 bedrooms. One is mine, and the other is for guests or an office. If the kids moved in permanently, I'd essentially be giving up my only private space. I also work long hours from home occasionally, so I need quiet and boundaries. I told Matt I'd think about it, but I also explained that my apartment simply isn't set up for 2 children permanently. I suggested other options like staying with his parents for a short while, getting help from social services, or looking for a larger rental. I even offered to help him financially with groceries or childcare if it made things easier. He didn't like any of these suggestions and became defensive. The next week, Matt called again, furious. He said I was being selfish and family should help each other, and accused me of not caring about my nieces and nephews. He said he had no one else to turn to, and that by refusing, I was letting the kids suffer. I tried to stay calm, but he kept pushing, saying things like, it's only a temporary thing, you're overreacting, and if you loved your family, you'd step up. At this point, I had to be firm. I told him that I couldn't house them permanently because I don't have the space, I have my own responsibilities, and it wouldn't be healthy for anyone, including the kids, if we were crammed into my tiny apartment for months or years. I also pointed out that this isn't just about inconvenience. I don't feel equipped to handle full-time childcare alongside my own work and lifestyle. Matt got really upset and hung up on me. Since then, he sent passive-aggressive texts, guilt-tripping messages about family obligations, and even shared some pictures of the kids asking if I could just try a little harder to make it work. I didn't respond to most of them, but I did reiterate that I could help in other ways, like babysitting occasionally, providing financial support, or helping him search for a bigger place. Our parents are caught in the middle. They say I'm right that my apartment isn't suitable for long-term childcare, but they also think I could do more since the kids are family. Some extended family members have started saying I should step up for my nieces and nephews, and family comes first, which has made me feel like I'm being judged for setting reasonable boundaries. I feel awful because I love my brother and his kids, but I also feel resentful that I'm being pressured into something I can't realistically handle. I don't want to ruin my relationship with him, but I also don't want to put myself in a situation that will stress me out and potentially harm my work and mental health. I've considered looking for a bigger place, but even if I did, I don't want to be forced into a living situation that feels like a long-term obligation. I also worry that if I give in, it will set a precedent where Matt expects me to solve all his crises. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to let my brother's kids live with me permanently, even though he says it's temporary and I could handle it because we're family. The story is long, but here's the crux. I want to support my family without compromising my own life and mental health, but everyone seems to think that refusing is morally wrong. AITA for refusing to help my sister after she asked me to cover for her at her job, even though it caused a huge family conflict. I, 32F, have always had a complicated relationship with my younger sister, Clara, 28F. We were close as kids, but as we grew older, our personalities clash more often than not. I tend to be very responsible and cautious, while Clara is spontaneous and sometimes acts without thinking about consequences. Our parents, who are fairly traditional, often sided with her, which has always frustrated me. I've tried to set boundaries over the years, but they're a work in progress. The issue started last month when Clara called me in a panic. She works as a shift supervisor at a mid-sized retail store and claimed she had an emergency with her child. She asked me to cover her shift because she couldn't make it, explaining that if she didn't work, she would lose a big bonus and risk her promotion. She stressed how critical this shift was for her. I told her up front that I had a lot on my plate and that covering a full shift for her was not something I could do. I offered to help in smaller ways, like watching her child for a few hours so she could get to work, but she became very upset and insisted that she needed me to literally do her job for her. I tried to reason with her, explaining that I am not qualified for her role. I don't have retail experience beyond basic cashiering years ago, and I'm not trained to supervise staff or manage inventory. I told her that it could cause problems if I tried to cover her, including potential disciplinary action for both of us. She accused me of being selfish and said I didn't care about her or her career. I reminded her that my life is also busy, and I can't just drop everything to solve her problems, especially when it involves responsibilities I'm not equipped for. The argument escalated. Clara started texting and calling repeatedly, accusing me of being the bad sister and saying I was letting her down in front of our parents. I ignored her calls for a while because I didn't want to fight, but eventually our mom got involved. Mom called me and was furious that I wouldn't step in to help Clara. She said I had an obligation to family first and that my sister needed me. I explained calmly that I could help in ways that were realistic and safe, like watching the child, but I could not perform her professional duties. Mom became even more upset and said I was being cold and unhelpful. Clara ended up calling several other family members to convince them to pressure me. My older brother tried to mediate, saying that I could at least come by the store and help a little to lighten her load. I refused again, and this led to a huge argument at a family dinner. Clara brought it up in front of everyone, framing it as me being unwilling to support her career and implying that I was being lazy. Mom jumped in, saying that I was acting selfish and that family support was supposed to be unconditional. My brother tried to calm things down, but it turned into a shouting match with me defending myself, Clara crying, and Mom visibly frustrated. After that dinner, the tension between us worsened. Clara has been passive-aggressive toward me ever since, making comments about how some people only care about themselves and aren't family-oriented. Our parents occasionally make remarks about how I should be more accommodating. Meanwhile, I've been feeling guilty because even though I know I set reasonable boundaries, my family acts like I've done something morally wrong. I have helped Clara in the past in ways that were reasonable, driving her to appointments, babysitting occasionally, and supporting her emotionally, but this situation felt different. I wasn't comfortable stepping into her professional role, which could have caused real problems for both of us. I've reflected a lot on this, and I still feel that my decision was justified, but the constant family pressure has made me second-guess myself. I am worried that refusing to cover her shift makes me appear unsupportive or selfish, but I also feel that my boundaries are reasonable and important. Clara has mentioned she feels betrayed, and my parents occasionally bring up the incident, making family gatherings tense. I understand that family should help each other, but I also believe there are limits to what one person can reasonably do, especially when it involves responsibilities that are outside their expertise. I don't want to be a bad sister, but I also don't want to put myself in a situation that could create problems for me professionally or personally. So, AITA for refusing to cover my sister's shift, even though it caused this huge family conflict? AITA for refusing to host my sister's wedding after she humiliated me in front of my entire family. I, 32F, have a younger sister, Emily, 28F, who has always had a flair for drama and a need to be the center of attention. Growing up, our relationship was complicated. We were close at times, but often competitive, and she had a way of making everything about her. Our parents have always favored her to some degree, which I tolerated for the sake of family harmony. Last year, Emily got engaged to her fiancé, Jason, 30M, who I genuinely like. When she announced that they wanted to have a wedding at my house, I hesitated. My house isn't enormous, but it's cozy and has a large backyard. I told her that I would need time to prepare and that hosting a wedding would require substantial effort and cost. I suggested they either rent a venue or limit the guest list. Emily insisted that my home would be perfect, and after repeated back and forths, I agreed on the condition that she would hire a professional planner and caterer, handle decorations, and compensate me for any damages or extra cleaning. I thought this was reasonable, and she seemed to agree. Fast forward to the week of the wedding, and chaos began. Emily started showing up daily, rearranging furniture without asking, and bringing large, uninvited friends to help set up. I tried to stay polite, reminding her that she needed to coordinate with the planner and that some of the items she wanted weren't feasible in my space. She waved me off, saying that I was being too controlling and making things stressful for everyone. The day before the wedding, things escalated. Emily had somehow convinced half the family that I was refusing to host out of spite, and she started texting them and posting passive-aggressive messages on social media. I ignored it, trying to focus on keeping the house intact. The wedding day arrived, and I was ready for a long, exhausting day. I was in the kitchen, making sure the caterers had access to everything, when Emily pulled me aside in front of our parents and some extended family. She started yelling, accusing me of sabotaging her wedding, of not loving her, and of being selfish. She then threw my engagement photos to the floor and stomped on them, saying I would never be able to measure up to her perfect day. I froze. Everyone was staring. My parents looked shocked, and I just walked away. Later that day, she demanded that I apologize publicly to her guests for ruining the mood and for being a terrible sister. I refused. At that point, I told her that she was welcome to have the wedding, but she could not expect me to be her personal servant or to tolerate public humiliation. I moved to a quiet room and stayed there for the rest of the event. After the wedding, the fallout began. Emily posted on social media that I had ruined her special day and that our parents had to step in to handle my disrespect. Several family members messaged me privately, some sympathizing, others taking her side. My parents said I should have been more understanding and not let her day be ruined by my feelings. Here's where it gets complicated. A few weeks later, I received a bill from my sister for what she called the cost of my uncooperative behavior, which included a percentage of catering, decorations, and extra cleaning fees. I refused to pay. I explained that she had agreed to hire the planner and caterer herself, and that any damage done was due to her insistence on having uninvited helpers moving around my house. She replied with an angry email calling me vindictive and a nightmare, and said she would be taking legal action if I didn't pay. I haven't spoken to Emily since, aside from a brief text where I told her I wouldn't tolerate harassment. My parents are upset with me, saying I should make peace and that I am overreacting. Some extended family has stopped talking to me as well, claiming that I should have swallowed my pride. I feel like I was completely justified in setting boundaries and refusing to tolerate humiliation, but I'm starting to wonder if I overreacted by not participating in the wedding after she attacked me. I don't want to pay her for something I didn't agree to financially, but part of me worries that the family might see me as the villain. So, AITA for refusing to host my sister's wedding and refusing to pay her for what she says are damages after she humiliated me in front of everyone. For context, my house is my personal space. I had clear conditions for hosting, and Emily's behavior during setup and the wedding itself crossed multiple lines. I want to maintain my boundaries, but I also want to understand if I mishandled this situation in any way. Have I gone too far, or am I justified in standing my ground? AITA for refusing to financially support my brother's business venture, even though it could ruin our family dynamic. I, 33F, have always been close to my younger brother, Ryan, 29M, and we've had a pretty normal sibling relationship. Mostly supportive, occasionally teasing each other, but nothing serious until recently. Ryan has always been a bit of a risk taker and has struggled with steady employment. He's had a string of jobs in sales, marketing, and freelance work, none of which lasted more than a year or two. I've supported him in small ways over the years, like helping him move, giving advice on resumes, or lending him a few $100s when he was in a pinch. But I've always tried to set limits because I know he tends to rely on me a little too much. About 6 months ago, Ryan called me out of the blue, extremely excited, and said he had a business idea he was convinced would make him rich. The idea is unusual, to put mildly. He wants to start a luxury home composting and insect farming business. The concept is that people will pay him to install special compost bins and insect farms in their homes, and then he'll sell the insects as gourmet protein to restaurants or pet stores. I have no experience in either composting or insect farming, so I didn't have much to say except that it sounded ambitious. The problem is, he's asking me for money to get it started. Not a small loan. He's asking for $25,000. He says he can't get a bank loan because he doesn't have a stable income, so my contribution is critical to the business launching successfully. He sent me a detailed business plan that reads like a mix between a science project and a Kickstarter pitch. He insists the venture is revolutionary and that I would essentially be a silent partner who would see returns in a few months. I told him that I couldn't just hand over that much money because I'm saving for a house with my partner and that I have other financial priorities. I also reminded him that he has no track record of running a successful business. He became defensive and accused me of not believing in him. He said I was being short-sighted and that I was letting fear control my decisions. Over the next few weeks, he escalated. He started showing up at my apartment unannounced to talk strategy, sending me 20-plus text messages a day with charts, graphs, and ideas, and even went so far as to contact my partner to pitch the plan directly. My partner is supportive of me, but has been extremely frustrated with Ryan, especially because he refuses to respect our boundaries. I try to gently explain to Ryan that I cannot and will not give him $25,000, that I'm happy to offer advice, but not money, and that he needs to pursue this independently. Ryan's reaction was explosive. He accused me of being selfish and said that if I don't invest, he might have to rethink our relationship. He's now telling family members that I'm actively blocking him from achieving his dreams and painting me as the villain. My parents are caught in the middle. They want to support him, but also think I'm being reasonable. My friends are mostly telling me I'm right to set boundaries, but some are starting to say I should give him a chance because he might be onto something. Recently, he made another dramatic move. He said that if I didn't give him the money, he would ask my parents, claiming they have more disposable income than me. I know my parents well enough to know they'd feel pressure to help him, which could create tension between all of us. I'm terrified that giving him money or allowing him to ask my parents will permanently damage our family dynamic. I feel torn because I love my brother, and I don't want him to fail, but I also cannot afford to gamble $25,000 on a project that is highly speculative and risky. He refuses to consider alternative funding options like crowdfunding, small business grants, or taking a smaller scale approach that doesn't require me to mortgage my own financial stability. I've tried to suggest compromises, like him starting with a pilot project using minimal funds, but he won't hear it. The tension has reached a boiling point. Ryan no longer talks to me directly without bringing up the money or the business. He makes snide comments about me during family gatherings, and I constantly feel guilty when thinking about him. I've considered temporarily limiting contact until after he has had a reality check, but I worry that might permanently damage our sibling relationship. I know families are supposed to support each other, but I also believe boundaries are important. I've already done so much for him in the past, and I feel like this time it's beyond reasonable. I also fear that giving him will make it impossible for me to say no in the future, because he's already hinted at next big ideas that will require even more money. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to give my brother $25,000 for a business venture that I believe is high risk and potentially unrealistic, even though he says it's crucial for his dreams and is framing me as unsupportive. I don't want to ruin our relationship, but I also don't want to compromise my own financial security or encourage what I see as reckless behavior. At the same time, I feel guilty every time I see him struggling and wondering if I could have helped. Has anyone navigated a situation where a family member asks for a substantial financial contribution to a high-risk project? How do you balance support, boundaries, and realistic expectations without creating long-term resentment? AITA for refusing to invite my younger brother to my wedding after what he did last year? This is going to be long, but I really need an outside perspective because everyone I talk to seems to have a different opinion, and I can't tell if I'm overreacting. I, 32F, have been with my fiancée, Alex, 34M, for about 6 years. We recently got engaged and are planning our wedding for later this year. Everything has been going pretty smoothly, except when it comes to my younger brother, Jake, 28M. Jake and I have always had a complicated relationship. Growing up, he was the typical younger sibling, annoying, mischievous, but overall harmless. However, once we got into our 20s, things changed. Jake became increasingly irresponsible, often borrowing money and never paying it back, lying about where he was or what he was doing, and sometimes dragging me into his messes. I tried to be supportive, but it got exhausting, and I started setting boundaries. Last year, I hosted my 31st birthday party at my apartment. I invited my close friends, some family, and Alex. Jake knew the guest list because I explicitly told him, and I also asked him not to bring any uninvited friends because my place is small. On the day of the party, Jake shows up with 3 of his friends, none of whom I know. I was annoyed but tried to let it go. Things escalated when one of his friends accidentally broke a vase I had inherited from my grandmother. I asked Jake to cover the costs since he brought them, and he refused, claiming it was just an accident and that I shouldn't make a big deal out of it. Then, later in the evening, Jake got extremely drunk, started an argument with another guest over a minor comment, and ended up getting kicked out by security. He refused to leave peacefully at first, and even tried to argue with Alex when Alex intervened. The aftermath left me stressed, and I had to apologize to several friends who witnessed the chaos. After that, I confronted Jake privately. I told him that his behavior was unacceptable and that if he continued acting like this, he couldn't expect to be treated as a normal adult in family settings. Jake's response was defensive. He said I was overreacting, that I had always been controlling, and that he was just trying to have fun. He also said he felt like I was favoring Alex and my friends over him. We didn't speak for a few months after that. Fast forward to now, with wedding planning. Alex and I agreed on a small, semi-formal wedding of about 80 people. Since the budget is tight, we're trying to limit the guest list to people we are confident will behave respectfully and contribute to a positive atmosphere. Given Jake's behavior on my birthday and the fact that he has a history of causing drama at family events, I decided not to include him on the guest list. I figured he could be invited for a post-wedding family dinner if he behaved himself, but he wouldn't be part of the main event. When my parents found out, they were shocked and immediately said I was being unfair. They pointed out that he is my brother, and it's my duty to include him in such an important milestone. I reminded them of what happened last year and said that I have to prioritize my own happiness and the atmosphere of the wedding over a sense of obligation. My parents responded that I was overreacting and punishing him for a single incident, though I pointed out that it wasn't a single incident, but a pattern. Jake found out through my mom and texted me a very passive-aggressive message saying, "So, I guess I'm not welcome at the most important day of my sister's life. That's fine. I'll just save everyone the trouble of dealing with me." I replied politely, explaining my reasons and offering the family dinner idea. He didn't respond after that. My extended family is split. Some think I'm justified, citing his past behavior and the importance of having a stress-free wedding. Others think I'm being harsh and that family should come first, regardless of past mistakes. I've thought a lot about it, and honestly, I don't feel bad about my decision. But a part of me worries that I'm being petty or too rigid, especially because it's my brother. I'm posting here because I want a neutral perspective. Am I the asshole for not inviting my younger brother to my wedding due to his past behavior? I know family dynamics are tricky, and I genuinely don't want to alienate him forever, but I also don't want to risk a repeat of last year's disaster. I've considered inviting him with strict conditions, like no plus ones, no drinking, etc., but I worry that enforcing those rules will cause another argument and stress on my wedding day. I also worry that even if he agrees, it won't go smoothly. So, Reddit AITA for not inviting my brother to my wedding because of what he did at my birthday and in general over the years. AITA for not letting my sister move in after she lost her job. I, 32F, have always been close to my younger sister, Clara, 28F. We grew up in a small town, and for most of our adult lives, we've lived in different cities, but we talk almost daily. Clara is vibrant, smart, and incredibly creative, but she's also impulsive and struggles with long-term planning. Our parents passed away a few years ago, so it's just the two of us now. I live in a modest two-bedroom apartment in the city. I work as a graphic designer and have been renting for the past 6 years. I've worked hard to create a stable life for myself, and while I wouldn't call myself wealthy, I'm financially independent and careful with money. Clara has had a more tumultuous path. She has bounced between jobs, sometimes leaving on her own terms, sometimes being let go. Over the years, I've helped her financially a few times, sending money to cover rent or bills when she was in a tight spot, but I always try to make it clear that it was a temporary lifeline, not a permanent solution. A couple of months ago, Clara called me hysterical. She had just been laid off from her job at a local boutique, which she loved, but apparently, the store was going under. She had very little savings, a month's notice, and nowhere to go. She asked if she could move in with me until she got back on her feet. I was hesitant. My apartment is not huge. My bedroom and living room are already fully functional for me. And while I technically have a spare bedroom, I've always used it as a guest room and home office. Sharing the space permanently would be a huge adjustment. I told her I needed to think about it. I started calculating expenses, space, and my own work-from-home needs. My apartment isn't suited for two adults living together full-time. The spare room is cramped, and the living room is small. I also work freelance occasionally, and having another person around could be distracting. I suggested some alternatives. She could look into temporary sublets, short-term rentals, or maybe stay with a friend. I also mentioned that I could help financially if she needed help covering rent elsewhere. Clara was devastated. She accused me of not caring about her and said I was being selfish. She pointed out that I had helped her out in the past and that now, when she truly needed me, I was refusing. She argued that living together would be temporary and that we were sisters, so family should help each other in tough times. She cried for hours on the phone, which made me feel awful, but I also knew that agreeing to her request would completely upend my life. I tried to explain my perspective. I told her I wasn't trying to abandon her. I just didn't think it was practical. I reminded her of the times I've helped her financially and said that this time I thought it would be more sustainable to help her find an apartment or cover part of her rent rather than have her move in with me. I also told her I needed to maintain my work-life balance and my own mental health. I suggested we could have a regular arrangement where I helped her financially and emotionally without sharing a living space. Claire's reaction was intense. She said she felt betrayed, that I was making excuses, and that I didn't trust her to live responsibly. She accused me of being controlling and prioritizing my comfort over family. She also brought up that our parents would have wanted me to help her in every way possible. We argued over the phone for nearly 2 hours. I stayed calm as much as I could, but eventually I had to hang up because it was escalating. Since then, our relationship has been tense. Clara has been trying to find an apartment, but she's struggling. She keeps sending me messages asking if she can move in just for a couple of weeks and mentioning how other family members have moved in with siblings during hard times. I keep reiterating my boundaries, but she keeps pushing. I feel like I'm being painted as the villain, even though I'm genuinely trying to help her in ways that don't compromise my own stability. A few mutual friends have weighed in, and the opinions are split. Some think I'm being overly rigid and that family comes first. Others agree that setting boundaries is reasonable and that I can't sacrifice my well-being indefinitely. I'm starting to feel guilty because Clara is genuinely in a tough spot, and it hurts to see her struggling. But at the same time, I know that letting her move in would likely cause tension, stress, and possibly even resentment between us in the long term. I also considered the potential fallout. If she moved in, I would have to adjust my work schedule, give up my personal space, and possibly even cover more of her expenses than I intended. I worry that temporary help could turn into indefinite dependency, and I don't want to jeopardize our relationship or my own stability. I feel like I'm caught between wanting to help her and needing to protect my own life. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to let my sister move in after she lost her job. I'm willing to support her financially and help her look for a new place, but I am not willing to share my apartment permanently. I feel like setting boundaries is necessary, but I also feel guilty and worry that I'm letting my sister down when she needs me most. I want to make it clear that I'm not refusing to help at all. I'm offering support in ways that I can manage, but she seems to interpret any limit I set as a personal rejection. I'm trying to navigate this without damaging our relationship, but it's proving extremely difficult. I'm hoping for perspective from people outside the situation who can weigh the balance between family loyalty and personal boundaries. AITA for refusing to attend my brother's wedding because of his bride? So I, 32M, have always had a complicated relationship with my younger brother, Mike, 29M. Growing up, we were close enough, typical sibling banter, occasional fights, but after college, our paths diverged. Mike moved across the country, started a tech career, and I stayed in our hometown, working in finance. Over the years, our contact dwindled to sporadic texts and occasional phone calls, but I always made an effort for birthdays and family gatherings. About 2 years ago, Mike started dating someone named Rachel. I met her once at a family dinner shortly after they started dating, and from the beginning, I was not a fan. She came across as overly critical, dismissive of my opinions, and had this habit of subtly putting down anyone who disagreed with her. Initially, I tried to chalk it up to first impression nerves, but over time, stories from mutual friends and family painted a consistent picture. Rachel was manipulative and controlling, especially toward Mike. Fast forward to last year, Mike got engaged. When he called me to tell me, I was happy for him at first, but the conversation quickly revealed how much Rachel had been influencing his life. He talked about their perfect future together, listing decisions she had made regarding his career, finances, and even our family dynamics. He seemed proud of letting her take the lead, but it honestly made me uncomfortable. I voiced some concerns gently, but he brushed them off, insisting I didn't understand the modern dynamics of relationships. The wedding planning started, and Rachel's influence was everywhere. She chose every detail, from the location to the guest list, and even the seating arrangements for family members. My parents mentioned to me that she had made a point to separate me from certain tables, claiming I might disrupt the harmony. I tried to talk to Mike about this, saying that while I wanted to support him, being deliberately excluded hurt, but he said it wasn't a big deal and that I should trust her judgment. Things reached a tipping point a few months ago. Mike asked me to be his best man. I initially said yes, thinking maybe this was an olive branch, a way for him to include me despite Rachel's influence. But soon after, Rachel started demanding I follow a series of rules for the role. I had to write a speech exactly the way she approved, avoid speaking to certain family members, and even practice my interactions with Mike for hours. When I pushed back, saying I wanted my speech to be heartfelt and authentic, not scripted, she accused me of trying to steal the spotlight from the bride. At that point, I realized this wasn't about me trying to be controlling. It was about her controlling everything. I tried to reason with Mike privately, explaining that I felt uncomfortable with how Rachel treated everyone and that her influence was creating an artificial dynamic in what should be a joyful family event. He got defensive, insisting that Rachel knew best and that I needed to accept that. He accused me of being dramatic and selfish, which hurt because I was trying to preserve our relationship and family harmony. After weeks of back and forth, I made a decision. I called Mike and told him I would not attend the wedding if Rachel was going to treat me, and potentially others, this way. I offered to attend the rehearsal dinner or other pre-wedding events in a neutral setting, but the wedding itself? I couldn't bring myself to participate in something where I felt deliberately sidelined and manipulated. The fallout has been significant. Mike is furious and claims I'm being unreasonable, saying I'm letting my personal feelings about Rachel ruin one of the happiest days of his life. My parents are upset too. They think I'm overreacting and causing unnecessary family drama. Some relatives understand my perspective, saying Rachel's behavior has been obvious for years, but others accuse me of being selfish and trying to punish Mike for choosing A. Partner they see as wonderful. I've received mixed messages from friends as well. Some say I'm justified. No one should feel forced to be part of a day where they are actively being undermined or disrespected. Others say I should put aside my personal grievances for family, that weddings are about compromise, and that refusing to attend might permanently damage my relationship with my brother. I know I'm walking a fine line. I love my brother and want him to be happy, but I feel like this wedding is less about him and more about Rachel's desire to control everything. I'm struggling with guilt because I know my absence will hurt him, but I also can't pretend everything is okay when I feel marginalized and manipulated. I've considered going and keeping my distance, but the thought of being around Rachel while watching Mike comply with her every demand fills me with anxiety and resentment. So here I am, torn. I want to support my brother, but I also need to respect my own boundaries. I can't decide if I'm justified in standing my ground or if I'm overreacting and letting personal feelings ruin a family milestone. AITA for refusing to attend my brother's wedding because of his bride? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.